What's up, y'all? It's Jess. Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. I'm in my living room and today is a very exciting day. Today we are going to be talking about buying seeds. Now this video is the first bit of content that I've made pertaining to planning next year's gardening season, which I'm so excited about. I love this time of year. I love all of the possibility that planning brings and the excitement. I love finding new things and just really yearning for the garden, because to me, when you're building up that desire for it, it's really the push that you need when you get into it and it's hard work and it starts to really push you and to your limits. It's like, oh, I wanted this so bad. And I just remember these days of curled up on the couch with a cup of tea and a catalog and how badly I just want to have my hands in the soil. I have already this week, since Baker Creek's free catalog has been making its way into many of your mailboxes, I've already gotten tons of messages from people asking questions that are basic questions, but they're so often prefaced by, hey, I'm so sorry that this is a stupid question, but you know, yada yada. And that breaks my heart, because the truth is, growing your own food is just not the mainstream. So we don't have super simple resources that this is just common knowledge. And so I really feel like those who have the information should be very giving with it. And those who need the information should not feel like they need to be apologetic because they need the information. This is something that if we really want to bring this back into the forefront of our culture, it's going to have to be with mentorship and tutelage and with the generosity of what we know. And I'm not an expert at all. 10 years ago, I was looking at seed catalogs for the first time, feeling very overwhelmed myself. I just wanted to make this video encouraging those of you who are sitting down at a seed catalog for the first time with big starry eyes, because there's so much beauty to see. I just want to encourage you with just some basic tools to navigate this and to feasibly purchase the seeds that you need to grow a great garden that you're going to be passionate about. Now, if you've been around here very long, you've definitely heard me tout the merits of heirlooms. I love growing heirloom seeds, and the reason for me was that I love the fact that I can put the work into the garden and I get to experience something in growing heirlooms that I might otherwise never get to see or taste. So many varieties they would be lost if it weren't for people who cared about them, and they certainly are not lining the shelves of our grocery stores. So to me, heirlooms are kind of helpful to, again, give me that push whenever the work gets hard, because it is tempting when you're growing a similar zucchini or yellow squash and a similar just plain red tomato or Roma tomato or whatever to what's at the store whenever it's summer and those things at the store are on sale for like 79 cents a pound, and you're working really hard and sweating your butt off pulling weeds, and it's exhausting in the garden. It's really tempting to throw your hands up. And so for me, when I know something is growing in my garden that I will not to get to experience if I don't do that work, that is a huge, huge motivational factor for me in gardening. So the first thing that I want to address, I have jingly bells on my slippers. The first thing that I want to address with you guys is where to buy your seeds. I have a very extensive video reviewing where my seeds, like some of my favorite places. It is by no means an exhaustive list. There are a lot of great seed companies, a lot of which I've just never really shopped from because early on I found ones that I really liked and I stuck with them. The number one place that most all of my seeds come from is Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. For the sake of full disclosure, at this point, I do have a bit of a business relationship with them. Like, they didn't pay me to make this video. It's nothing like that. I genuinely believe in them, but they do fly me out to their conferences and their expos and all of that to speak. A few other companies, just off the top of my head, that are kind of a go-to for me. I love M.I. Gardener. Luke has a YouTube channel. He's really awesome. It's a family-run business. They're really sweet people, and they have great prices. I love Brad Gates from Wild Boar Farms. You guys have heard me talk about his tomatoes a lot. I I adore Brad. He's brilliant as far as growing tomatoes, and he's created the future heirlooms, the heirlooms of this generation. They're all new varieties that have been created in the last several years, but they're fantastic. Many of my favorite tomatoes are Wild Boar Farms. And there are some other seed companies that I love, like notably Hudson Valley Seed Company, have beautiful packaging with their artwork on their packaging, super sweet people. And another off the top of my head is Fruition Seeds, and they are geared towards growers that are northern growers that have shorter climates. Now, of course, I can grow the stuff that they sell here because I have a long growing season, but if you are limited and you don't have to do a lot of guesswork on what you can grow, a company like that would be good. So that's just like a brief overview. You can buy seeds a lot of places. There are going to be a ton of companies available. I would avoid purchasing seeds on places like eBay and Wish and these companies that really have nothing to do with gardening. I've heard a lot of people say that they got seeds in from places like that and they did not germinate. And those kinds of places, you're not gonna really have the opportunity for a relationship with that seller. And so I think that is something to avoid. You can go into places like the Dollar Tree and Walmart and big box stores and buy seeds. A lot of times you can buy cheap seeds. I really prefer to purchase seeds from people who are doing something to further the gardening movement, specifically the heirloom movement. And whenever you can buy from places like Baker Creek, and where you might pay $3 or $4 for a package of seeds, you get so many seeds in that package. Or you can purchase from Luke in My Gardener, where you're getting seeds for 99 cents for a pack. I don't feel a real need to purchase from big box stores. Now, if you've got like a local purveyor, you've got somebody who has like a shop or something. I love supporting local people. Just think about when you're going to purchase seeds, what your dollars are supporting. You know, are they supporting like a big corporation and a giant brand that may or may not be doing anything to actually further the home gardening movement and the heirloom movement? I would just encourage you to think of those. But there are lots and lots of options. Now, on to the more practical stuff, as far as like when you've got a catalog like this beautiful thing in your hands and you open it up, and you could very, very easily get completely overwhelmed by the many choices. My goodness, it's amazing. I literally just, this is like how some people look at jewelry catalogs. This is the seed catalog for me. When I open this, I'm like, oh man. I mean, it's intense. I'm feeling it. I haven't looked through this because I was waiting to do a video. There are so many options, which can be overwhelming. Now, the first thing that you need to do whenever you are planning a garden and you're looking at purchasing seeds is, and you need to know this anyway, you need to know what your growing zone is. And this is, there's a little bit of leeway on this, but just to have a general idea, it's good to know your growing zone. And you can look, there are different websites that tell you, like the Farmer's Almanac website is a really great resource if you've not already explored that. But what you can do basically is just Google it. Like the closest city to me is Conway, Arkansas, so I'm gonna put Conway, Arkansas growing zone into Google. And here it pops up just right off the top. Conway, Arkansas is in the USDA hardiness zone 7B. So I'm gonna write down 7B. That's my growing zone. The next thing that you need to figure out is the length of your growing season. So again, I'm gonna look up Conway, Arkansas, last frost date. And what this is based on years past and weather patterns and all of that. It's been guessed what day it's been estimated what day the last frost will be done by. Essentially, this is the day in the spring that it's not going to get cold enough to kill your plants again. Again, it's just an estimate. First and last frost dates. I mean, I'm looking at this now in December for, March or April in my area. There's no way they can actually pinpoint that. And so really coming down to it, you're going to want to watch the weather and stuff. But as far as for seed purchasing, this gives you a general idea. So the thing that pops up here tells me on average each winter your risk of frost is from October 31st to April 1st in my area. And you might have to do a little bit more searching, but just a quick Google search of first and last frost dates should bring it up pretty good. If you live in a really rural area, just go with the closest, bigger city to you. So I'm now going to write down April 1st to October 31st. And again, I'm going to go back to Google because we work smarter, not harder. And I'm going to say how many days between April 1st and October 31st. And right here on my phone, it pops up and says 213 days. So now I know that my growing season is roughly 213 days. Now I'm in the South, so I have a really long growing season. I know some of you are in areas where you're growing with like 100 days, and that does change the way that you're going to buy seeds. So what that is basically saying to you, that 213 days or however many days your growing season is those are the amount of days that you are going to have in your season without a killing frost. Now there are some crops that you can grow under freezing temperatures. They won't die. I actually usually start planting out my cold weather stuff like root vegetables and brassicas and carrots and peas, lettuces, all of that. Calendula flowers do fine in the cold weather. All of those things go out for me in like mid to late February. And so they're fine usually, or at least with a little light cover, for like a month and a half before. But knowing your season length gives you an idea when you start looking at things and they say this is an 80-day variety or this is a 100-day variety. You kind of have an idea. If I start that, is it going to have enough warm days to actually come to crop and produce a harvest? The other thing that is going to do, knowing how many warm days you're going to have, and to be honest, I mean, those early parts of that 213 days and the late parts of that 213 days, warm may be a stretch for those days. It may not actually be that warm, but it won't have a killing frost. So you need to keep that in mind. This is just a roundabout idea and something that you need to kind of have in the back of your head to navigate this. But what that's going to tell you, and I'm going to go to tomatoes, because this is one of the more popular things that gets grown in summer gardens. And it's one of the things that can only get grown in warm weather. Tomatoes cannot handle a frost. And I'm going to point out the fact that we have all of these beautiful photos and descriptions, but not all of these have the days listed. Another thing that I get asked a lot is people say, how do you know if it's a determinate or an indeterminate tomato? A determinate is like a bush variety. It grows to a certain amount of height. It produces a certain amount of flowers, therefore a certain amount of fruits. And once it's done with its harvest, it's done. It doesn't produce anymore. An indeterminate is a vining variety, and it just keeps growing and producing more flowers and more fruit as long as you provide it the nutrition and the support it needs. And unfortunately, in most seed catalogs or on seed packets, a lot of times that is not listed. Just so you know, when you're looking at tomatoes, for the most part, they're indeterminates unless otherwise said. If it's a determinate variety, that's usually specified. So if there's nothing there, you can mostly assume that that is an indeterminate variety. Now, like here, this pork chop tomato states that it's 75 to 85 days. Some of the 75 to 95 days on the pineapple. The big rainbow does not have amount of days listed, but you can kind of expect when you're looking at like a really big tomato and another really big tomato, it's going to be about the same. For the most part, that's going to be a similar length. 80 days is kind of what I keep in my head for large slicers, and for cherries and stuff it's like 55 or 60 is on average. And then there are some tomatoes that are going to be earlier, and they'll be called like early girl. A lot of times it's worked into the name, or it's stated this is a very early variety, and sometimes those are in the like 60-day range as well. All that said, and I understand that this is just a lot, but that is actually counting the days to a ripe fruit from when you transplant a plant into the ground. And unfortunately, with many different seed varieties, when you're looking at these, that is not specified. But for things that are commonly started from seed, which is tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, usually whenever there are things that are commonly started from seed, if they have a day that's listed to harvest, it's usually from the point of transplant. And again, there's nothing specified to say, well, when did you transplant it? Did you transplant it 6 weeks after you started it or 10 weeks after you started it? So the assumption is usually, when they say that, is that you transplanted it about 6 weeks after you started it. So what you're looking at is 6 weeks to start the plant and then the amount of days that's listed. When you're looking at things like squash or cucumbers or melons, things that are more commonly direct sown and it has a days to harvest listed, usually that is actually from the day that you put the seed in the ground to the day that it comes to harvest, that's being referred to. So can I just pause for a second in this like make your brain explode numbers thing and tell you, I really am of the mind that it's really best to just try. And if you don't get something, it's okay. Just let it go and chalk it up to a learning experience. But if you get hung up on trying to count out your days and look at your calendar and figure out, how many days are they talking about? Is it transplant? Is it after? Should I even plant this? You can drive yourself crazy and discourage yourself from gardening at all if you get crazy hung up on that. I do think it's wise, for instance, if you live in a northern climate, and you know that your growing season is only 120 days, and you're looking at these big tomatoes that are 80-day varieties, what that really needs to tell you is that you might need to start your seeds a little bit earlier inside if you're going to try to grow those. And obviously, there are some people in very, very northern climates and like the extreme areas that maybe have like 60 or 70 growing seasons that you just might not be able to grow those. And probably if you live in one of those places, you probably know that. Here's a real good gauge. What are the people around you growing? Now, I know we don't have a ton of community. This isn't just a super popular thing. Everybody's not growing food. You can't just go ask all your neighbors necessarily. But if you go to farmers markets, that's a great place to connect and have a conversation with people who are growing gardens, and just ask them, hey, do you have success growing tomatoes here? If you are looking at the numbers and thinking, I don't know if this adds up, I don't even know if this is going to be possible, go ask somebody else who's growing in the area, and they might say, oh yeah, I grow tomatoes, but I have a greenhouse. Or they might say, well, I've found this really great variety that comes to ripeness really quickly. And there you've got a resource. That's something I can't tell you, but it is something, if you have this information, you know what you're looking for. Another good resource that is huge to me and that I actually learned a ton from, I still do, but when I was first starting to purchase seeds and I didn't have YouTube, I didn't have you guys to talk to, I did not have the resources that I have now, this was a lifesaver to me. Actually, Baker Creek's website, like, it's great to get the catalog and look through the paper catalog and dream. I love this. It's a huge source of entertainment for me in the winter. But I actually still go on the website as I'm looking for things. For instance, just pulled this up. This is the Purple Lady Bok Choy. And I can find that in the catalog and I can look at it and go, well, this is really beautiful. This is really interesting. But is this gonna work where I am? Or am I gonna like this? Or what are the issues with this plant? If you go on here, this resource, like right now, there are 26 reviews on this variety. This was actually just introduced last year. So there's already a lot of information that's available on this variety. And you go in and, for instance, this first review says, great grower in soft soil, decent and heavy clay. I am growing these in several areas. I have a raised bed. Really long paragraph explaining where they are. They're in Phoenix. They're growing them during the winter months, where they only get light frost, and they're explaining all of the conditions that they're growing it in. They're explaining where, and there are lots of reviews like that. There are people that say, this is what zone I'm growing it in. I'm growing it in the ground. I'm growing it in raised beds. I had this issue. I found that this one dealt with this wilt, or this one was very resistant to it. That is a great resource. I love Baker Creek's review section. It is an incredible companion whenever you're using the catalog. And just if you're ever searching for a variety and you're looking at it, or maybe you got seeds in a swap and you want to know more about them, go read the reviews on Baker Creek's website. And that will give you more of an idea as well about whether you're going to need to start things beforehand and all of that. A lot of times you get enough information to make your choice for you. For instance, here on this cucumber, it says they withstand drought, moisture, and attack of fungoid disease to a remarkable degree. And if you have any gardening experience, you might say, oh wow, I deal with a lot of humidity, and so the fact that this has resistance to moisture and fungal disease, that's a great match for my garden, and you have that experience. If you're new, you're not going to know that yet. And so truly, I think when you're new, it's good to try a few things. It's good to get something that is very popular. I know that there's a temptation to only do like the really unusual stuff, because you're like, wow, and I love doing the unusual stuff. I'm a big fan of doing the unusual stuff. But I always grow, like for cucumbers, for instance, one of the popular ones, National Pickling Cucumber, Boston Pickling Cucumber. These ones that are in so many people's gardens, because they're in those gardens for a reason. And so for me, I will have a baseline of something that I feel pretty confident is going to be successful. And then on top of that, I'll try a couple of other things. When it comes to direct sowing versus seed starting, I have a long, extensive video explaining seed starting, just like everything that you need to know about that. And so I won't go into that in depth, so I will link that down below. A little bit further into direct sowing, if you live in a place where you have a really long season, really where I am has a very long season, you can direct sow things that are typically started inside, like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. Those things, you can just go ahead and sow the seed in the garden. And I've heard that things can be hardier that way, and I know that we'll have plants volunteer, and they're super, super strong. And so that's, of course, if they're volunteering, they're direct sown because fruit fell from the parent plant. I always start those things because, to me, when I can go ahead and start those in January or February, and I'm transplanting them out as soon as the frost is over, and then I then start getting fruit in like late June, early July, instead of if I were direct sowing when the frost was over and getting fruit later in the year. And so many of these things are going to really vary by your zone. So if you've decided, like, you kind of know what you're looking at, you're kind of deciding what you want to add into your garden, but you're hitting that big question of, well, how much do I actually need? This is another one of those questions, and I get asked this so much, and it's so variable that it's very difficult for me to just give you, there's not like a one-size-fits-all answer. I have seen all the charts from different places saying grow this many plants for a family of this size, or grow this many plants per person, and I don't know how we can feasibly apply that. Because, for instance, like with tomatoes, and I know I go here a lot, I go to tomatoes a lot, it's just such a popular example, but in my household, we have 8 people, and of those people, 3 eat fresh tomatoes. Everybody will eat salsa, everybody will eat sauce. And so it's so hard to say, I can't say grow this many plants per person, because, 3 of us will live off tomatoes in the summer, and the rest will only eat them in spaghetti sauce and ketchup and soups and stews and all of that. So to me, like, a really structured formula just simply cannot work for that situation. Again, this is going to come with experience. And there are so many factors that come in. Like the first year I gardened, I was so pumped about cucumbers. I grew like 10 cucumber plants, and apparently it was a great year for cucumbers. We grew so many cucumbers that the pig wouldn't eat them anymore. Like we were trying to 5-gallon buckets. I couldn't can anymore. I didn't ever want to see another pickle in my life. There were so many cucumbers. So the next year I was like, I need to back off the cucumbers big time. And so I did. I backed off the cucumbers. I only grow a couple plants. And then we had this crazy hot spring. The cucumber plants were a hot mess of just fungus and failure. And it was a good thing we had all of those canned pickles, because I didn't can a single jar of pickles that year. I only used the ones from the year before because we couldn't grow any. And so it was kind of like, wow, had I only grown a few plants on the year that the conditions were great, would have been plenty. And then on the year that the conditions were not great, it would have been better had I grown a whole lot more, because we only had like a 2-week window where they were actually successful. You can't know these things. You can't know what's going to happen. You can kind of figure out like a general productivity and know what you're wanting to do. If you only want to eat fresh out of your garden, you are not planning on buying a dehydrator or a canner, you're not planning on putting anything up in your freezer or preparing ingredients to use later, you don't need to grow a big garden. A pretty small garden is going to produce enough. A few cherry tomato plants, if you're going to be just eating them fresh, is going to be enough. Even if you have a really huge family, there's no way you could use all that. I grow 25 cherry tomato plants. It's a ton. I'll pick 5 pounds of cherry tomatoes every couple of days, but we dehydrate them. Otherwise, it would just be silly for us to grow that much. My overall advice, if you were getting started in gardening and you're just starting to grow from seed, again, grow something that you feel pretty confident is going to be successful. Grow something that excites you and that you're eager to have, to taste, and to see. And you don't have to grow a ton. It would be better for you to do a smaller garden and have a lot of success with it than overdo it with a really large garden and get overwhelmed and give up. And if you are saying, I want a can, make sure you do grow enough. Like to me, in that situation, for instance, if you're wanting to can green beans, grow a whole long row of green beans, grow a whole bed of green beans, because if you grow 4 or 5 plants, you're never going to have enough at the same time to actually fill jars. So in situations like that, if you're saying I just want to eat fresh, make sure you keep it small. If you're saying I definitely want a can, I'm really committed to put the time in, I say go ahead, find something that you feel like is going to be successful and grow a large amount of those. So again, now I know that doesn't really give you like a real clear thing, and if you're one of those people that needs like a clear plan and exactly what you're supposed to do, gardening is just, I don't really feel like it works that way. However, I want to encourage you, you learn your way quickly. Growing things one time is going to give you a really clear idea of what you want to do again the next time. And you're going to tweak it, and you're going to get overwhelmed sometimes by too much, and sometimes you're going to get disappointed by not enough, but it's okay. So now let's talk about like the number of varieties that you may want to have, or how many like seeds you actually need. Now I am a collector of seeds. I love seeds. I don't have a lot of frivolity in my life. I'm not one of those people that has like a lot of collections or just, holds on to just a lot of stuff. However, I love seeds, and it's something that just brings me a lot of joy. And so I have a really large seed collection. I have way more than I actually need. This is my tomato collection. My friend Nanda gave me this case. It's actually a photo case, and so I have all my tomato varieties separated out here. Like here is striped and streaked multicolor large varieties, purples and blacks, yellows and golds. And so I can kind of find, here's all my Wild Boar Farm medium and large, and Wild Boar Farm cherries and smalls. So I've got all of my seeds kind of separated out in these little things, so I can easily find something if I'm looking for it. Now, when I first got into gardening with heirlooms, I used to spend my birthday money, my Christmas money every year on seeds, and I would end up with all these leftover. And I hate telling you this right now, but the first 2 years that I bought all those seeds, and I'm still like, it still makes me cringe. I actually threw them all the extras away. I didn't have anybody that I knew that gardened that would use them that year, and it said right there on the package, you know, packaged for this year. And so I was under the impression that you could not keep them longer than that. They would be no good. That's completely not true. Luke from My Gardener did some videos a couple of years ago where he actually got this shadow box of seeds, and he sprouted, I think they were like 87-year-old seeds, these seeds that have been in the shadow box for 87 years. And he actually sprouted them and grew them and is like reestablishing this variety. And that to me was like the permission, like it's okay. Now you are gonna lose some germination rate over time. If you store them in like an area that is cool, dry, and dark, you should have no problem growing those seeds for years. Now you wouldn't want to keep them, like I don't keep my seeds in the greenhouse. That would be way too hot and humid. We keep them in our basement. We actually run a dehumidifier down there anyway, so it kind of it makes this ideal situation to keep seeds. And like I have these in this plastic container. I have another dresser for the rest of my seeds, and it's cool, it's dark, and it's dry. And so I have no reason to worry that those seeds won't last. Some people keep seeds in the refrigerator or the freezer, and I've actually considered doing that, like just putting together like a small container of just like really basic seeds and keeping them in the bottom of the deep freezer just in case, you know, like just to have them long term if ever there was a situation of really needing to grow food, that I would have those. But for the most part, I don't worry just a whole lot about having the ability to have more seeds, because I have a lot, and also I know how to grow them. And if you can grow the seeds you have, you can always have more seeds because you can save them. So don't think that because you're buying these that this is your seed budget for this year, that you're spending this much on this garden. This package of tomato seeds, I just opened this one. This is Sun Gold Select. It's just the first one that I grabbed. All right, let's just take a look at what we've got here. Now, it states on here that it's a minimum of 25 seeds. Okay, so this is actually 125 seeds that's in this package. That's actually one of the reasons why I originally loved Baker Creek so much, because I was always shopping for seeds on a really tight budget. And the packs of tomato seeds that I originally bought after I stopped throwing away after the first year, I used for like 4 or 5 years after that. I have seed packets that I literally planted out of for 4 or 5 years. That to me, that makes that $2.50. This is a seed packet for $2.50. That just makes that so much more feasible when you're looking at the fact that that could be putting plants in your garden for years. Another thing that you can keep in mind when you know you're going to be getting packets that have quite a few seeds in them is going with a friend. Like my friend Lisa and I used to sit down with the catalog together and figure out what we wanted, and we would just split the cost halfway, and we would split all of those seed packets in half and just get little baggies from the jewelry section at big box stores, or little coin bags from office supply stores, and we would take those and split them all halfway. Obviously, this is more than enough seeds for 2 people to grow out of. This is more than enough seeds for 5 people to grow out of. And you never know how much extra is gonna be in a pack, but I know, like for instance with Baker Creek, they are really generous in how they package their seeds. I also took part in a lot of swaps on my earlier days of gardening, and I still will occasionally send some stuff into swaps, but I don't really need a lot of seeds, so I don't do a lot of them anymore. There's one in particular which I think is fantastic. It's called the Super Duper Seed Swap, and they're on Instagram. I'll put a link down below. I think that the registration is open right now for the spring swap, and what you do is like you pay a flat fee of something like $10 which covers your shipping and everything, and you send in I think 25 or 30 little packages of seeds, and you get back 25 or 30 different packages of seeds from people all over the place. And so what you can potentially do when you realize that there's like 100 and something seeds in a pack like this, you can order 1 or 2 packages, package them up, and then participate in a swap and get like 25 packages back of all different kinds of stuff to try. So when you are sitting down with your catalog and you're thinking about what you're going to order, keep stuff like that in mind. Keep in mind how you could be resourceful, how you could split things up. So if you're buying 5 different types of cucumbers because you really want to try 5 different types of cucumbers, keep in mind that you're going to have a lot of extra seeds that you're not going to grow. What could you do with those to maybe fill some of the other needs that you have? Could you trade with somebody, participate in a swap, split the order with somebody else? And again, you can remember that you could save them. So you might place a large seed order, but if you know that that's going to be filling your garden for a few years, it kind of offsets that cost a little bit because those seeds are going to last. Another thing that I like to do, and this is just kind of my method of seed shopping, is I just like sit down with this catalog, and my first thing is, I mean, this is like the Toys R Us catalog whenever I was 8 years old. I just sit down with it with a marker, a pen, and I take a bunch of notes. I get sticky notes and kind of like stick them out off of the edge whenever there's a page that there's something that I want on it, and I'll put a star next to it, and I basically compose like my must grow list and then my maybe grow list. And since I have gardened in the past, and this won't pertain to those of you who are brand new, but I have my must grow list of the things that I know I love. Like those aren't going anywhere. They're gonna have space in my garden. And I fill that out first. And then I kind of figure out how much gardening space does that leave me with. And then I get the must grow list of new things. And I start going through and finding the things that excite me, that look really interesting, that I've never tried before. And I write those down. And then the maybe ends up being, like, things get moved over to that list. Whenever I realize that I've got like 10 varieties of kale written down on my must grow from the old varieties plus the new one, I might go, probably should back it up a little bit. Or I might grow 10 varieties of kale, which I completely condone that. I have to kind of look at it and be realistic about what I'm actually going to grow. And that's where I start looking and saying, okay, well, I've got this variety that's very, very similar to this one. And that's usually when I really start digging into those reviews and I start seeing, is there something that disqualifies one of these from being a good fit for my garden? For instance, I might go in those reviews and see that one of the varieties that I'm looking at, someone says, I had a hard time growing this in hot weather, or this really was susceptible to fungal disease, because I live in an area that's very humid. So like fungal disease is an issue in my garden. That's something I have to be aware of. And at that point, I might go, okay, well, that's the one that's going to go off the list. And that's kind of how I pare it down. I really look for disqualifiers. If I just looked for qualifiers and the things that made me want to grow it, my list would be insane. Like it would be impossible for me to have space for that many things. Another thing, again, and I'm going to keep reiterating, talk to people. I love to talk to people. And when someone says, oh, you got to grow this, it's awesome, I loved it. Ask questions. Why did you love it? Well, what growing zone are you in? What was it about this that you really liked? What did you not like about it? Were there any drawbacks to this? Or if someone says, ooh, I hated that. That didn't do good for me. Ask questions. Well, why is that? What failed about this for you? What zone are you in? What are your gardening methods? And to me, like, I don't want to let anybody else's experience, like, ultimately qualify or disqualify something. I want to know why that's their opinion, and then I'll apply that to my garden. Another thing, and I guess this kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, be realistic with yourself about what your family actually needs. And And from that place, let that be the backbone of your planning is realistic. And then be a little frivolous. Like, be a little frivolous around the edges. Like I said, grow things that excite you. I think that that's important. But make sure you don't get so excited about all of the rare stuff and the unusual stuff and the stuff you've never tried that you end up with a garden full of things and a grocery bill that hasn't been affected by it at all, because you're just growing these odds and ends little things that everybody tries but nobody actually eats. For me, like, I grew the snake beans last year. That wasn't a substantial thing that like fed us a large amount of food. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed trying them and tasting them, and you know, we ate some of them. We didn't eat a ton of them. It wasn't replacing meals. And so it would be easy, I think, whenever you're sitting down with these beautiful colored catalogs and showing all these things growing well, going, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and that's so strange, and that's odd, and that's cool, and get so excited about all of those kind of extras. Let those be the icing in your garden, but not the cake. Like, let the things that you know are actually going to fill your pantry and make a place on your kitchen table and fill the plate on your kitchen table. Let those be the majority of what you're doing. And in that, like, for instance, I love the example of kale. I like to grow all the different varieties of kale because we eat kale chips, we put it in soups, we'll saute it in the morning with some onions and put some fried eggs on top of it. Like, kale is so versatile. And then if it's one that we're not crazy about, like, it's just like, this isn't my favorite, I don't like the texture, whatever, we just juice it. And so that's something that I feel a little leeway to try all the new things, because I know it's not gonna waste. I know that's something that's still going to reduce my grocery budget. And so when it comes down to seed shopping, like, if you know that your family does not eat salad, like, nobody's gonna eat a salad, you won't eat a salad, everybody else won't eat a salad, don't grow 10 varieties of lettuce. What are you gonna do with all that lettuce? Like, be a little realistic. Or if you really love the lettuces and you don't eat salads, think, okay, well, and make a list of what you can make with it. I can make lettuce wraps. We could wrap this around a burger and eat it instead of a bun on a burger. You know, get the list and go, okay, how much lettuce do I actually need with this realistic of application of what I'm actually gonna do with it? And then grow a few plants of it instead of growing a massive row that's ultimately gonna end up wasting. I know this is by no means like a super comprehensive thing. There are still a lot of questions that you may have about like what to do and how to plan. I hope that you feel encouraged, or at least have some clarity in that. When I sit down to do these videos, I'm always like, oh, there's just so many factors that could go into this, but I want to give you the courage to at least try, and the bearing to go into it realistically, reasonably, to have fun, to get excited. This is a beautiful thing. I love growing from seed. I love the opportunities that it gives us. It is just such an incredible thing to me to get to experience foods that otherwise we would not know. And you can save money, or you can spend tons of money and buy lots of seeds. But it's overall, it's a beautiful thing. And so I bless you guys. I hope that you have a wonderful experience cozying up, and I will have more content out soon about seed shopping, garden planning, going to Baker Creek next week, and I'm excited to take y'all with me. Thanks, guys.